In the world of logistics, few loads demand as much delicacy, timing, and control as a shipment of exotic flowers. It's not just about beauty, it's about biology, chemistry, and physics, all coordinated to preserve something as fragile as memory and as perishable as breath. Behind every petal that arrives intact at a distant market lies an invisible ballet of engineering systems designed to prevent dehydration, control respiration, and block microscopic enemies that can't even be seen with the naked eye. Flowers, in global export chains, are treated less like agricultural products and more like precision instruments, transported with protocols that resemble those used for semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and even organs. The structural fragility of exotic flowers is astonishing. 6 minutes after harvest, the dehydration process begins, and the curve is unforgiving. A scratch invisible to the human eye can compromise a blossom. Exposure to ethylene, a natural gas released by ripening fruit or fuel exhaust, initiates a chain reaction that shortens the flower's post-arrival life by days. This is not hypothetical damage. It's molecular sabotage that happens in transit, often before the plane has left the tarmac. Each stem is a biological countdown, and the entire logistics operation is built around slowing that countdown as much as science will allow. To do that, exporters have turned to a surprising source of inspiration: microchip fabrication. In clean rooms where processors are manufactured, the threat isn't just dust. Static discharge, vibration, and even ambient humidity. The slightest deviation ruins an entire production batch. The same mindset has been adopted in floriculture: isolation, regulation, stabilization. From the moment the flower is cut, it enters an engineered environment where every parameter, light, airflow, temperature, and humidity, is measured, managed, and adjusted like a climate-controlled vault. Because in a sense, it is one. Packaging has evolved into a kind of passive biome. Engineers use a concept called thermal breathing cycles, packaging systems that simulate the way flowers breathe in nature. These aren't just boxes, they're microclimates designed to absorb temperature shocks and regulate moisture the same way a fruit ripening chamber might operate. Inside, petals are kept in a suspended state, not frozen, not warm, but held in a zone of metabolic pause, where deterioration is delayed, not by chance, but by thermohygrometric precision. To grasp how serious this is, look at the shipping containers used in naval defense to transport ammunition across oceans. These chambers monitor pressure, humidity, and vibration continuously to prevent explosions from environmental instability. It's not far from what happens when flowers are flown from Nairobi to Paris. Inside, air cargo holds, containers equipped with shock absorbers and temperature stabilizers ensure that even a minor turbulence won't translate into petal bruising or moisture loss. This isn't luxury, it's necessity, because unlike many products that tolerate a margin of error, flowers don't forgive. If a shipment arrives with slightly wilted edges, the rejection rate can climb instantly. Contracts are lost. Entire harvests are discarded. That's why floriculture exports, especially of exotic varieties, are now governed by protocols that resemble pharmaceutical transport more than anything typically found in agriculture. And this is just the beginning, because the biggest threats aren't even visible. They're gaseous, thermal, microbial. The next challenge is knowing what happens when you place a flower beside a banana, and why that single decision can turn a thriving export operation into a logistical failure. But before we get there, one thing should be clear. Exporting flowers is not just about beauty. It's about precision, orchestration, and a silent war against time. There's a silent enemy in the global flower trade, one that has no color, no odor, and no immediate trace. It doesn't break stems or stain petals. It simply accelerates time. Ethylene is a plant hormone, naturally produced by ripening fruits, vegetables, and even flowers themselves. But in the confined space of a cargo hold, its effects compound. A single pallet of maturing bananas loaded too close to a shipment of lilies can cause premature opening, fading color, and irreversible petal drop. In floral logistics, this invisible molecule can destroy value long before the flowers reach their destination. Most exporters now treat ethylene not as a chemical curiosity, but as a contaminant that must be intercepted. This shift in mindset has led to the adoption of advanced packaging technologies borrowed from the pharmaceutical industry. Nanoclay-infused wraps, originally designed to protect blister-packed medicines, are now being used in floriculture. These materials are engineered to absorb volatile organic compounds, trapping ethylene before it reaches the delicate tissues of the flowers. The packaging doesn't just contain the product, it cleans the air around it. The numbers tell the story. In side-by-side comparative studies, shipments of Ethiopian roses using passive ethylene barrier wraps retained 94% of their bud rigidity after 6,000 kilometers of travel. The same variety, packed in conventional plastic, showed only 61% rigidity upon arrival. That difference translates directly into shelf life, appearance, and economic return. It is not just about arriving. It's about arriving intact, with every visual cue of freshness preserved. Even with the best materials, one logistical error can undo everything. A Colombian exporter preparing a high-value shipment to the Netherlands saw a full order rejected after arrival. Investigation revealed that during a transfer at a subcontracted terminal in Panama, the flower pallets had been temporarily stored next to crates of bananas in a mixed cargo bay. The air was clean, the temperature was controlled, but the proximity was enough. Ethylene did its work silently. The loss? Over 280,000 euros. Not because of bad farming, not because of poor handling, but because of a misplaced decision, one that began a chemical chain reaction no one could stop. This is the nature of modern floriculture logistics. It is not dominated by speed alone, but by molecular control. Ethylene must be tracked, filtered, and neutralized with the same seriousness as pathogens in a laboratory. It's not about moving faster. It's about creating a clean corridor, an invisible pipeline of air purity, from farm to market. Every cubic meter of atmosphere inside a flower container becomes a carefully managed environment. Every breath the flowers take, every gram of gas they emit is part of a choreography of delay, to hold nature in pause, just long enough for beauty to reach its buyer. The logic is simple, but the stakes are high. One molecule out of place can cost days of life. One incompatible cargo can mean rejection. That's why floriculture isn't just about horticulture anymore. It's about precision chemistry, air filtration, and strategic separation. Because in this industry, every hour of shelf life is bought not with time, but with control. Temperature is one of the most misunderstood variables in floral logistics. While cold slows metabolism, protects pigments, and preserves turgor, too much cold becomes lethal. The line between preservation and destruction is measured in fractions of a degree. For exotic flowers, especially those with high water content and fine cellular membranes, freezing is not an option. Below certain thresholds, intracellular water crystallizes, rupturing cell walls and leaving petals bruised, browned, and unsellable. The damage is irreversible and often invisible until it's too late. The industry has responded by developing cooling technologies that don't simply chill, they simulate dormancy. One of the most effective tools is the use of phase change materials, or PCMs. These are sophisticated gel packs that maintain a stable microclimate inside shipping containers. Designed to hold a target temperature of 0.5 degrees Celsius with a margin of just plus 0.2 degrees, they create a narrow thermal corridor where metabolism is suspended, but cells remain intact. This method was first refined for the transport of cryopharmaceuticals. Today, it protects thousands of floral shipments every week on intercontinental flights. But even stability has limits. Surprisingly, studies have shown that flowers respond better to a soft, controlled fluctuation in temperature than to a perfectly flat, cold line. A slight diurnal rhythm, Mimicking natural day-night cycles with just 1 degree of variation helps maintain turgor pressure more effectively. It's as if the flower believes it is still in the field, surrounded by dew, protected by morning air. Physiologically, this illusion matters. It keeps the cells responsive, not dormant. And in floriculture, responsiveness means resilience. On farms in Kenya, this principle has led to the rise of modular cool tunnels, flexible, pre-shipment storage units that maintain ambient temperatures with microcontrolled airflow. Flowers are held here not just to cool down, but to acclimate. It's a process of a thermal alignment between field and cargo. Since their adoption, client complaints in Europe have dropped by 67%. Fewer broken stems, fewer reports of early wilting, higher retention of color and form. The difference wasn't a new flower, it was a new atmosphere. Temperature in this context becomes more than a number. It becomes a dialogue between biology and engineering. The flower must be kept in a kind of sleep, not frozen, not stressed, but gently suspended. A false morning, a controlled pause, and the margin for error is measured in decimals. If a flower doesn't feel like it's still in its native dawn, still breathing the moisture of the soil it grew in, still receiving the signals of sunrise and wind, then it arrives as a copy of itself, no longer living, no longer valuable. That's why logistics is no longer just a matter of refrigeration. It's a matter of fidelity. The challenge is not to keep the flower alive. The challenge is to make it believe it never left home. A flower in transit is not simply moving through space. It's moving through a suspension of time. From harvest to arrival, from the Andes to a boutique in Paris, it doesn't travel as a commodity. It travels as a system of living tissues, biological reactions, and molecular balances, all of which must be managed with the same seriousness as a transplant. The comparison is not poetic, it's operational. The floriculture industry now borrows protocols from the world of organ transportation because flowers, like human tissue, are perishable not only in temperature, but in rhythm, pressure, and respiration. One destabilized parameter can initiate a cascade of deterioration that no technology can reverse. In this context, logistics becomes something far more complex than movement. It becomes a form of biotechnical choreography. Each stem is cut in the early hours of the morning, when turgor pressure is at its peak and water content is naturally high. From that moment on, every action, from hydration pulses to temperature shock avoidance, must preserve the illusion that the flower is still in the field. Any abrupt change in humidity, any sharp vibration or exposure to volatile gases becomes an invisible attack. The challenge is not to maintain cold. It's to maintain coherence between the flower's internal biology and its external environment, across thousands of kilometers. To achieve this, high-end exporters have turned to integrated humidity chambers within cargo containers. These systems don't just chill, they breathe. Using algorithms that simulate hydration rhythms, inspired by drip irrigation systems that deliver moisture in controlled microbursts, the containers maintain atmospheric oscillations that reflect the flower's natural environment. For some species, that means gradual moisture increases during transit to maintain petal softness. For others, it means synchronized temperature depressions to delay enzymatic activity. Each container becomes a custom ecosystem, tailored not to the market but to the memory of the soil. This philosophy has found its most advanced expression in the Netherlands, with the Petal Vault project. Developed in response to growing demands for quality assurance in European floral distribution, the system integrates real-time sensors, RFID traceability, and predictive freshness scoring. Every box of flowers carries a digital profile, including harvest time, farm elevation, species, hydration index, and expected travel duration. As the shipment crosses borders, environmental conditions are adjusted dynamically, creating a form of responsive preservation. In the 2022 Valentine's Day cycle, when demand pressure is at its annual peak, shipments managed by the Petal Vault protocol reported a 40% reduction in rejection rates across Dutch and German wholesalers. Not because the flowers were inherently stronger, but because the system was smarter. This is where agricultural logistics merges with biotechnology, where the handling of flowers begins to mirror the handling of organs, and it forces us to rethink what floriculture actually represents. Behind each shipment is not just a chain of supply, but a chain of simulation, a recreation of life conditions in artificial space, and that requires more than refrigeration. It requires fidelity to nature's tempo. The flower that arrives in perfect condition didn't survive transport. It was sustained by an invisible intelligence that monitored it, protected it, and reintroduced it to the world only when the timing was right. So when a bouquet is handed over, it's not just a gesture of affection or beauty. It's the final scene in a story of mechanical care and biological precision, of fields, algorithms, and flight decks all working in unison to deliver something fleeting, intact. That story doesn't end in the hands of the buyer. It ends in the moment when the petals, still fresh, open as if nothing had happened. Because in truth, the entire journey was designed to make them forget that they ever left.